So it's pretty hard for me to fathom anybody listening to this album and go, yeah, it's not very good. Like, I dare you to listen to this album and think and just not at least feel something. This is classic rock and roll. This is classic Elvis. I think he's hitting a lot of his different areas that he was able to kind of really perfect in the 50s. And because you've got rockabilly, like skiffle right off the bat. You've kind of like with the second track. And by the way, I just want to say before going further, I listened to this on this. It's not on Spotify proper. It's like somebody did a playlist, and I did check the track listings against Wikipedia, and they do seem accurate. Although I don't know if they're the actual versions that you hear. Like if you were to buy the actual copy of the Sun Sessions, if they're the actual copies. But so I'm going off of the Spotify playlist, just FYI. But yeah, right off the bat, you've got this rockabilly. That's all right. I always knew that as a Beatles song. I knew it was an Elvis song, but I've heard that plenty of times covered by the Beatles. Very skiffle, shuffle, rockabilly type stuff. Early rock and roll.
Do you know when that was recorded? It's pretty crazy to think about this.
It's like 55. Aren't these all from 55 and 56?
Nope. That was recorded on July 5th, 1954, Matt. It is the earliest recording of that and I Love You Because, as both versions of it, right, that are on here. Those are the earliest, of July 5th, and then Blue Moon of Kentucky was July 7th. Most of the rest of the songs were from 1954, but there are some from early and mid 1955 as well.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it's this is like the beginning of popular rock and roll. So he's got like kind of more of the fast paced, early rock and roll stuff. He's got some country stuff on here. And then he's got really tender ballads. But by the time I got to the 12th track, I Love You Because, I was thinking to myself, songs like this make it seem kind of funny that, probably people that are roughly our grandparents' age, who were adults, when Elvis was happening, made it kind of funny that they hated the fact that he was swiveling his hips and stuff, because this is the type of song that my grandparents would have loved. Just like this really beautiful, nice little ballad. So, Elvis was able to, he probably could have, been appealing for a lot of people, depending on like what genres or how old they were. But that was, so he's got a lot of variety on here. I also picked up on track number 8, Baby Let's Play House. That's where John Lennon got the line for Run for Your Life, because that's where Elvis says, I'd rather see you dead than to be with another man, which was that line that Lennon stole from for his Run for Your Life track, on the last track on Rubber Soul. So relatively quick album. I think it's about 40 minutes long. Yeah, plenty of songs on it. There's 16 tracks, but it's just great. It's classic rock and roll. It's a nice, kind of palate cleanser to the stuff that we've been listening to, and kind of takes us back to the roots of where all this stuff started. And he's a great voice. He's great. He's a great artist. And even though he didn't, this was kind of before all the singer-songwriters came along. This is when artists mostly sang songs that were being, written by professional songwriters. Elvis was never really a songwriter. He was mostly a performer and a singer. But it doesn't take away from, just how great this is and how how influential he was. Because, there's a reason he's the king. And this is an very easy listen. Big thumbs up. Go listen to it.
Great. Yeah, I'm along the same lines. I think the main thing I got from this is you can tell the talent is there right from the beginning. You can feel the energy that he conveys through the music. He's got a great voice, as Matt said. I think that gets sometimes forgotten, because I think the image of Elvis is bigger, and the legacy of him is bigger than kind of his voice at this point. But he has this great like kind of deep voice, and with a little twang on it. And
what would you say Elvis is? A baritone, like a deep baritone? Is that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I
don't think he's not hitting bass notes, but he's also he's high enough. So he's like baritone / tenor, depending on the song.
And I think you can tell. I got the feeling you can tell he's having fun recording this stuff. I think he is happy doing that. That's kind of the thing I got from that. And like Matt said, I don't think any of these are original songs, right? They're probably songs that have been around for a while or were hot at the time. And
all professional songwriter songs.
okay, yeah.
I don't know. Did Elvis? Did he ever write any songs? I don't know if he's ever written.
I don't know.
Boy, I feel like someone listening to this can fill us in the which is good. Like, please fill us in on the comments. But I can definitively say he did not write any of these 16 songs. They were songwriters or standards. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the songs themselves are a little formulaic. He definitely slides into this rhythm of singing his verse and then letting the musicians play a little and then kind of rinse and repeat on that. So I could see how somebody might not say or might think, what's the big deal? This kind of sounds like what I've heard before. But I think if you think about it from, a perspective of being there at the time, it would feel really fresh and fun. I got a lot of Buddy Holly vibes too. I feel like this is kind of the same type of music or style that Buddy Holly, I mean, he was from Texas, right? I think so, kind of that southern style of country / rockabilly, like Matt said. It's also interesting that there's two different versions of the same song on here. I thought that was, I'm not sure if that's happened before on one of our albums that we listened to.
Unless it's like a callback, like a reprise, right? But no, not a different version altogether.
Right.
Yeah, these are definitely distinctively different in, I think, tempo and kind of mood. And so that I Love You Because there's two different versions of that on here. I think my favorite song on here is probably That's All Right and Milk Cow Boogie Blues, which funnily enough actually makes a brief appearance in Get Back, the documentary. I am on part 2, and John Lennon plays a little bit of that when they're just messing around at some point. So I think Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, a lot of these songs seem like songs that either the Beatles did cover or they would have covered. I'm sure they were very well versed in Elvis's catalog.
Yeah. Well, and keep in mind, Elvis's catalog is also other people's catalog, because a lot of these songs he's singing are people. Yep. Yes. Okay. So I just want to throw that in there, not take away from Elvis.
But they probably, my guess too, is that they probably, like Elvis probably made a lot of these songs more famous, or these songs are known because Elvis did them, probably more so than what the original ones were.
Of course.
Is my guess for a lot of these.
Yeah. And probably a lot of the black artists too that perform these songs that we don't hear about. Or didn't get as famous as Elvis. So yeah, shout out to them as well. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It breezed by. I wasn't like blown away or anything, but I was like, all right, this is good. I can enjoy this. And yeah, I love his energy, and I love his voice.
Well, there you go. I want to point out a connection to an album we covered a while back, the Ray Charles Modern Sounds in Country and Western. And at the time, we talked about how Ray Charles was sort of the first black artist to do country Western music, and how we thought that was really interesting. But the interesting thing on this one is that Elvis walks that line quite a bit. He's got the rockabilly sound that became nebulous rock and roll, but he's doing clearly a mix of music that comes from the blues and the black tradition mixed with country type music as well. And so he goes effortlessly sort of back and forth. And Elvis, he's the beginning of rock and roll, but he's also sort of the evolution of 20s, 30s, and 40s country and R&B and blues and jazz. He kind of exploded all of it together and said, okay, here's all of this music. And one thing I want to mention too is television, right? Like before that, I imagine consuming all of that music, you were hedged in a little bit more because what was being played for you was what you were able to listen to, depending on what part of the country you were in, right? Also, what you could see, which of course, if you were black, was limited, right, in terms of things. But also, even if you were white, you probably were not going down and seeing, true blues and stuff, right? You're going to stuff, but it was a different audience. And Elvis kind of fused all of that together a little bit. Along with others, let me say that, but at that beginning, and that's really what the beginning of rock was. And there were a lot of albums this week, but in completely different ways than this one. So I'll save the thought, but it's interesting that we jumped ahead to 77 and 78 because music had kind of taken a turn away from some of the things that we've covered in the 60s and 70s. But there were a couple albums this week that threw it back to some things we've heard before, but this took it like even further back to the albums we were covering in the early days of CTS in the 60s. And yeah, I mean, the way Elvis did these songs is what ultimately influenced the sound that would be the second derivation of it, which is the rock we were listening to in the 60s, right? That's kind of, where it headed. So Elvis is this interesting bridge between the classic sounds and that. And of course, the Beatles, I think, as we mentioned, are the most clear synthesis of that. And the Stones almost took the Elvis element out of it, right? And did their own interpretation of blues without that filter. And I think that was kind of my take. Josh mentioned it. Elvis has an incredible voice, like an incredible voice. He delivers love songs in a way that is instantly catchy, but also, even when you're listening to 16 pretty straightforward love songs, it doesn't wear on you because Elvis's charisma as a performer is what stands out. And even the musical accompaniment, I wouldn't necessarily say it's too diverse in terms of the sound, but it's Elvis's voice and charisma that gives each song its own life. And so it's the same thing we said last time when we did the From Elvis in Memphis, or From Memphis Elvis album with all other material. But that's the takeaway. That's the thing. If you don't know I imagine the people listening to this are either gonna be passionate about and know Elvis very well, and I'm sure that's a part of what they realized drew it to it, or they may know Elvis as sort of an entity, right, that is of another era, as he kind of was for us, but even more so, because at least when we were growing up, Elvis was still very much in the discussion, right? I feel like Elvis has sort of just receded a little bit, which is a shame because he has a huge part in rock music, but maybe some of that is because rock music itself has receded, right? And so he went with it.
Yeah, I just wonder too, because he died so young. I wonder if that impacted it. But you're right. I feel like the legacy of Elvis has faded, even from when we were younger.
Well, and that's just how, as time goes on, right? I mean, we were far enough removed from Elvis. Kids today are really far removed from Elvis, and music is, like you said, John. Rock's not even really a really popular genre anymore. It's more of a niche now, and so it's this it's just the evolution of music. So I think as time goes on, that's just going to happen with every artist over time. But yeah, at least
the 50s fell out quicker, it feels like, than the 60s have in some ways.
Yeah,
because the 60s still can be, and the 60s was a long time ago too, but the 60s still kind of gets discussed even by young people today who are pretty aware of most of the hitters from the 60s,
Well, the 60s was a much more, politically and culturally, it was a much more tumultuous time, and it was much more, it's where the rock and roll, like the whole lifestyle of rock and roll of being the rebel and going against, the man and the culture and all that stuff, or the society. The 50s was more of a milquetoast, kind of scene, and so
it was for certain
it's not as
people.
Cool,
I want to go back once again, though, that the image of the 50s was a very specific image. There were a lot of people that were not included in what that vision was. And ironically, a lot of those people were like Elvis, right? Like, when you think about it, Elvis became a thing for people in, Levittown, and, that's not kind of crossed over. But there were a lot of different 50s experiences, and I think one of the things that drives me nuts in history is the fact that we get these narratives, right, of what it was like to live in the 40s or the roaring 20s and the suburban 50s and the free swinging 60s, and the vast majority of people are not caught up in any of these narratives. And
I was speaking more of the if you listen to the music, this stuff is all very the lyrics, the content.
Right.
It's not dangerous, there's nobody's calling out anything. It's a very
in the modern context, it as you mentioned before, it was considered dangerous.
That was more of the image thing, though, wasn't it? I mean, The music itself was about love and there was no cursing, right? There was no really message to anybody to get up and, and fight the power of anything like that,
Baby Let's Play House and stuff like that, probably in its era, right? Was pretty
But I'm saying as time goes on, though, I think the '60s is still music from the '60s still carries a lot of the edge than the music from the '50s does, and that's why it probably doesn't age as well. Or people hear it, see the images then hear the songs and think, man, that's kind of lame. It's like that was risque. It was like that was nothing. So, I think it's harder for that to carry over into modern,
that's a really good point,
younger
Matt.
kids. So
that's a really good point. There is less edge for sure in terms of if you're looking at it in 2022 and you're 16 years old or even 25 years old and you listen to an album from 1966 or 67 or 68, it's going to seem light years ahead in terms of
they're all doing
than
dope and kind of haven't, it's just, so. Yeah. But anyway, this album's awesome.
It is. I enjoyed it quite a bit. My favorite track is Mystery Train. I just want to go on the record with that one. Yeah. How about
this reminded me of the comment that you made about Kraftwerk. I felt like this was very much like the skiffle sound is very much like the sound of music on a train, like chugging along, kind of it's like and playing the guitar like that is very much part of the percussion.
Sure.
Which is kind of this fast chugging along kind of sound.
I like Trying to Get Over You as well. John.
Yes, that's a good song.
Yeah.
That's a really good song. There's a lot of good songs on this, but yeah, Mystery Train's my favorite. I enjoyed Milk Cow Blues Boogie as well.
That was a good one. Yep.
Written by Kokomo Arnold, which is my favorite of the songwriters. So on this,
nice.
All right, yeah, Elvis Sun Sessions, 2 for 2 Elvis. So Elvis fans, you can't say we don't love your hero's stuff. I'm joking because we've gotten a lot of feedback recently, but we're not tailoring it just to be nice. But Elvis has earned his 2 positive reviews. Good stuff, and very different albums. So check both of them out.